Welcome back. So if you look up here on the whiteboard, I have an equation. It has an equal sign. I know it's quadratic because it has my exponent 2, so it is degree 2. It's x squared. And I know to solve a quadratic equation, I need to factor. But to factor, the first step is to set it equal to 0. So on the right side, I have to move my 11x over by doing the opposite operation, which is subtracting. All right? On the left side, I have 3 terms. None of them are alike, so I have to write them in the correct descending order. So this would be 4x squared minus 11x minus 3 equals 0. It is very important to keep the equal 0 to preserve the equation. Now, if you look here, step 2 is always to factor. Once you have all your terms on the left side with a quadratic, you factor. First rule of factoring is GCF. Well, there's nothing in common with these 3 terms, so we don't have a GCF. Because it's 3 terms, we know it's not difference of perfect squares. We know it's a trinomial. But it's not, in my world, an easy trinomial because it doesn't start out x squared. It's a difficult trinomial because the coefficient is 4, which means you have 2 different ways to factor this. And in any algebra class, we're not concerned about which way you factor it, just as long as you know how to factor it. So you're going to have to choose which method works best for you. I was brought up factoring a difficult trinomial by thinking backwards FOIL. So if you remember, I would write above here F for first, L for last, O and I for the outers and inners. And I know a pattern. Every trinomial will factor into 2 binomials. So I'm going to start thinking backwards. I start with the first term. What in algebra can multiply to 4x squared? Well, I have choices. That could be 4x times 1x, or that could be 2x times 2x. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know which option is going to work, so I list both. After the first term, I go to the last term. Well, that's a 3. Well, that's okay because my only factors of 3 are 1 and 3. So I know when I put my numbers, I can only use a 1 and a 3. But when we factor a difficult trinomial, it matters which number's placed where. So that's why this is trial and error. It's trying to figure out where the pieces go. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to put a 1 and a 3. The only way I know whether that's correct or not is to make the middle term. I want to subtract my outers and inners to make 11. So if you look, my outers, 4 times 3x would be 12x. My inners, 1 times x will be 1x. If I have a 12x and a 1x, would that subtract to 11x? Yeah, I hit it on the first time. That's just being lucky. Okay? Now, if I'm going to subtract, I know my signs have to be different. If I want a negative 11, who's bigger, the inners or the outers? The outers are bigger. So the 3 would be negative because I'd want a negative 12x, and my 1 would be positive. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, Ms. Black, it wouldn't matter what order you put the numbers in. Just to prove to you you're wrong, if you put the 3 here and the 1 here, your outers would be 4x, your inners would be 3x, and 4x and 3x will not subtract to 11. If you put the numbers down here, your outers would have been 2 times 3, that would have been 6x, and the inners would have been 2x. 6x and 2x does not subtract to 11x. So we talked about this. When you factor a difficult trinomial, it matters what order the numbers are in. So yes, the 1 went here, the 3 went here. When I'm done factoring that difficult trinomial, I have 2 x's. So now I have 2 linear equations, and those are easy to solve. You set each of these parentheses equal to 0 to show your 2 linear equations, and then you solve. To solve this, you would subtract 1 for this linear. You get 4x equals negative 1. You would divide by 4. It is okay if it doesn't divide. You can leave it a fraction. It's negative 1/4. If you know your decimal equivalent, a fourth of $1 is 25 cents. We would accept negative 25 hundredths. A terminating decimal or a fraction is acceptable. Over here, we would add 3 for this linear, and get x is 3. And there are your solutions. Now, if you're not a fan of doing the backwards FOIL method to factor a difficult, that's fine. But then you better know the other method, which is grouping. So I'm going to write the equation again up here, just to make sure we go through the steps. It's quadratic equation because it has an equal sign and it has an exponent of 2. First step is to set it equal to 0, so I still have to move the 11x over to the left. I write my new left side in the correct descending order. Still a difficult trinomial. Now, if you want to do grouping, here's the way you do it. Grouping says you take the coefficient and multiply the constant. 4 times 3 is 12. And you go over here to the side and you list the factors of 12. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Correct? Great. Okay. We want to know which of these factors are going to subtract to make 11. Well, that's easy. It'd be 1 and 12. So what we do, if you remember when we do grouping, we list the first term. That doesn't change. We list the last term. That doesn't change. We are replacing negative 11x. To make it a negative 11x, the signs would have to be different. You would need a negative 12x and a positive 1x. Now you have 4 terms. Now you'll do grouping, which I called Noah's Ark. You'll group them 2 by 2. You'll factor out what's in common. What's in common with 4x squared minus 12x? The GCF is 4x. 4x squared divided by 4x is x. Negative 12x divided by 4x is negative 3. If you take the first 2 terms and pull out the GCF, you must do it for the last 2 terms. Well, 1x and negative 3 don't have anything in common to divide them by other than a positive 1. So you write the positive 1. 1x divided by 1 is x. Negative 3 divided by 1 is negative 3. You know you did grouping correctly because your 2 parentheses are identical. So if you remember, we write the x minus 3, and then we write what's on the outside, the 4x plus 1. If you look, isn't that the same expression here I did by trial and error? Now I got it by grouping. Remember, because these parentheses are connected by multiplication, it doesn't matter what order they're written in. Now you're going to write your 2 linear equations, x minus 3 equals 0, 4x plus 1 equals 0, and you're going to solve them, and you're going to get the same 2 solutions. So the moral of the story is, you decide when it's a difficult trinomial you're factoring which method you prefer. See you in the next module.